Hey cats, it's EDDBUD here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm looking at whether midsole stack height limits are justified. Having used high stack shoes on the last few long runs that I've done, I have to say, hands down, that they do lessen effort, decrease the fatigue, and increase performance, even at easier paces. As such, do they present an unfair advantage, even for average, everyday runners? Let's discuss. Thanks for joining us here at EDDBUD Running Shoe Reviews, always appreciated. If you haven't done so already, join up as an EDDBUD Running Shoe Reviews member. You can find a link in the description that will let you do so, or if you head over to the channel page, there's a button that says join. You know what to do. If you haven't done so already as well, support the channel by hitting that subscribe button and also clicking the bell below for notifications when I launch those new videos for you. If you have a moment of time, hit that like button. Dankeschön. I'm no elite runner, guys, I just enjoy running. I do get out there most days when I can motivate myself, which is most days, and I take in the odd race from time to time. Today I'm exploring the pros and the cons of those more maximally cushioned race shoes, and do they create a playing field that just isn't level? I think for those of us that run as a hobby, whether that's a very serious one or just one for fun, I say wear what you want, wear what makes you happy. If you can afford a shoe and it brings you joy, and don't worry about it. I think fortunately most of those people out there that used to say, "Oh, you're too slow for this shoe,"
that's just for elite people.
I think most of those have drifted away now. I think you can wear any shoe you want to do any type of run you want to. I do though strongly believe that shoes such as the ALPHAFLY Next Percent from Nike or the adizero PrimeX from adidas do improve performance even at easier paces. There's no denying here, I think, that the technology, or at least the implementation of that technology, does give a bit of a helping hand. When you look at this situation at elite level, I think perhaps if you've finally honed your form, nutrition's there, you've got some sort of very strict race plan, this huge training block leading up to a race, is it going to make as much difference? I think perhaps not, actually. I do think at a sort of more amateur level that it can mask some poor running form, maybe smooth out that transition a little bit more from heel to toe, and generally elevate the efficiency of pretty much any runner. You might disagree with me about some of the points in this video, that's absolutely fine. We're all entitled to our own opinions, but don't forget I'm exploring the pros and the cons here. Now, is there anything wrong with wearing one of these shoes? Shoes in the past have had assistive tech and no one moans about those anymore. I mean, look at the Nike Tailwind, for example. That was one of the first shoes to create a bit of a buzz. That one had an air unit incorporated into the midsole. Did people protest about it? Well, yes, they did a little bit. But I think equally with a more complex shoe, there's more that can go wrong, isn't there? That just had some foam and an air unit, bit of rubber on the bottom, good to go. But that sounds like quite a few running shoes now, doesn't it? Those ALPHAFLY air units do burst, don't they? We've seen horror stories of people wearing them on a race. After a few miles, they just pop. I can't imagine that being particularly pleasant. You know, it would just make you feel unbalanced. People were worried about that in the past as well, even with the Tailwind. Is the air unit just going to burst? That air bubble in the back of the Air Max, will it just pop? And I'll be left with this sort of massive foam and not a lot else. I think a few runners did shy away from purchasing those shoes for that reason, but over time I think their durability worries just drifted away. We do know that with this Nike experiment here that they did replace part of the ZoomX foam here with those air units, that these apparently give a little bit more energy return than the foam itself. In this case, does that help us understand the inclusion of the extra foam that we get in something like the PrimeX? I mean, that's got even more assistive tech in it. It's got the energy rods and some blades underneath those. I believe there's a plate in the heel as well, so it's quite a lot of material in that shoe. We've all seen those studies suggesting that it's the foam that actually improves the efficiency rather than these carbon plates. I'm inclined to agree with those studies. I mean, I'm a man of science, I look at the data and I can't get away from the fact that even on a long run today in the ALPHAFLY, the effort is significantly reduced. There's a lot of foam in that shoe, and I think as those distances increase in those longer runs, the advantages that the shoe offers only become more and more significant. Let's look at this from a slightly different perspective now. Is the idea of using these lighter, more cushioned shoes in training actually lying to ourselves? Should we save them for racing only? Or does that somewhat defeat the fatigue lessening properties of these shoes and decrease the value per mile? It's not like they're really fragile now. You can use these things on a more daily frequent basis. Is it truly nonsensical now in 2022 to use a much firmer, perhaps more durable and resilient shoe in training, that's perhaps less forgiving than some of these other shoes, and just let the body take a real pounding there, on purpose almost. Does that make sense? Like, if we have a really easy life with no kind of ups and downs, we just make life easy for ourselves all the time, you know, ordering in fast food perhaps, just taking the route of least resistance always, does that make us less resilient? I often find on a long run that if I actually set out and keep going in a specific direction for a certain amount of time, a certain number of miles, I know I've got to then get back. If I do some sort of loop, I'm tempted more often than not to actually end the run a little bit earlier. Does that make sense? If I know I've got to do the return leg and it's like 5 or 6 miles, then I just got to do it. That's the way it is. Builds up the resilience. As usual, I think a middle-of-the-road approach here is the most sensible. I think use what lets you train and doesn't injure you, and never use a shoe to try and train through injuries. I see that all the time. Somebody puts on a very, very cushioned shoe that perhaps negates an injury they may have, and it just gets worse and worse. Perhaps using these shoes in moderation, using them for speed sessions, perhaps longer runs to get you accustomed to them for when you use them during a race. Let's not forget that actually most of our miles should be easy miles anyway, building up that aerobic base and then putting in very specific speed work. That will help us to remain injury free, and that's what we want. Want to get to that race without any problems whatsoever. Those easy miles should be pleasurable. We should be enjoying them. If a shoe helps us to do that, then what's the problem? Surely it's a bit counterproductive to run loads and loads of miles in a training shoe, then slap on the foam skyscrapers and actually expect magic results. We won't be able to harness their advantages without actually utilizing them at some point in our training. It's like with exams, you do mock tests, don't you, to get yourself ready to do an exam, make sure you've covered all the relevant bases. It's the same in training. You need to run at those paces you want to hit in the race. Some of these shoes could really help you do that. Though, is using one of these shoes a little bit like having a calculator or some assistive tech during the exam? See, I like to explore all of the different viewpoints. I'm not saying yes, I'm not saying no, I'm literally evaluating the situation. Do I think shoes like this are assistive? Well, yes I do. Some of them, yes. I think I have tried out some super shoes over the last couple of years that I really didn't think were that super. This is one shoe I think is super, but then how tall do you want to be? I think if you don't use some of these shoes in training and then expect to use them on race day and get the best out of them, well, it might actually go the other way. They could even detract from your performance. I recall my good buddy Kev Burton picked up a pair of the ALPHAFLYs not long after they released, and he just found them unusable due to that 4mm drop, despite being a big 4% and next percent fan. And the turbo, of course. That's Kev Burton's favourite. It's coming back, Kev. It's coming back. I found improvements from using the Tempo Next Percent from Nike, which is a heavier shoe, over shorter distances. Other people just couldn't utilise them at all. I think if I wore the Tempo Next Percent in a 5 or 10k run, I could smash it. We'll have to try that. But when it comes to distance, I think the ALPHAFLY would probably be my marathon shoe of choice when I select one later this year. In these odd times, the stacks and the stakes are very high. I think with a race shoe, you want to make sure you get it right. So easy to perhaps wear something new that you've recently purchased, but is that actually going to be beneficial to you? You've still got to run the miles though, guys, and hit those target paces. These shoes might make your running more efficient, but they're not going to run the miles for you. What's your take on this very emotive subject, viewers? I'm not sure there's really a right or wrong answer here. After all, everybody's got their own take on this. Some people prefer much lower stack shoes for racing. Other people are turning up in ALPHAFLYs, PrimeXs even, and producing some great results. I think we just need to look at what makes us happy, what works for us. We're all different, everybody runs in a slightly different way. If there's a shoe that particularly works for you, let me know what it is. As usual, guys, your thoughts and opinions down in the comments. Musical interlude time. A great band I've just discovered, literally of the last couple of days. Yard Act, with their album, The Overload. Very post-punk sounds here, very angular, very edgy. I must say, warning, there are some explicit lyrics here. The Overload is a very interesting song. Lots of angular riffs, bendy, stretchy guitars. Drums here on some of the tracks almost sounds like a drum and bass tune. Nice paces to them, could be very useful for running. Payday has some very funky wah riffs, almost reminiscent of something you might expect from The Fall. 100% Endurance finishes the album off on a much more relaxed and chilled out sort of tempo with some nice electric organ. Really, it's a bit of a mixed bag, this one, guys. Go and check it out. The Overload by Yard Act. Thanks for sticking with me to the end of today's video, guys. It is always appreciated. Help the channel out by picking up some merchandise from the links below, and make sure, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button and also click the bell below for notifications when we roll them out for you. Give this video a thumbs up like, it helps out with that algorithm. My name's EDDBUD, and I'll be seeing you